we have Rajnish Kumar, who's the group CTPO for ixigo, talking about how he wants to bring in the next billion users. So over to you, Rajnish.
Thanks, Sihun. It's great to be speaking here. Thanks to WiT as well for inviting me. I would love to share my experience today about how we went ahead and built for the next billion users audience. Just to give you some perspective around this. So we started going after the next billion user audience way back in 2013. And the whole point of doing that was that we wanted to kind of solve for some core problems of this underserved, audience. Now, in hindsight, things might look good, but back then, when you're taking that bet, it was not an easy bet to take. Right? Today, we might be sitting on almost 250 million downloads and 37 million monthly active users. But getting to those numbers over all these years was all because of an asymmetric bet that we took back in those days. And I think before I talk about what kind of strategy we went through to conquer that next billion user audience, I want to talk about something that we did, which was more at a DNA level of the organization that helped us solve for that audience, right? So one of the things which is very important was that we had always had this culture of innovation, which we equated to solving low ROI problems. And low ROI, what I mean is low ROI in the short term, but high ROI in the long term or mid-term solutions, right? And the whole point of doing that is that you start by solving a small problem which needs disproportionate effort and has very little ROI in the short term, but then requires courage. If I go by that logic, you will see that going after this next billion user audience back in the days, there was no revenue to be made in the short term, right? And hence, for an organization to take a bet and put like disproportionate amount of time, resources on a problem that is not going to be yielding any revenue in the short term is a very courageous bet to take. And that's one thing that kind of differentiates the roadmap of most companies, right? Which is why we built products which solved customer pain areas, but never had any revenue impact, right, in the short term, right? So, for example, I talk about the fully automatic web check-in that we built, which would check in a customer automatically into a flight and get in the best free seat, right? Or airfare prediction, which would tell customers to not book a flight and wait till the fares drop. Or train PNR prediction. Basically, what it did was it would predict whether a waitlisted ticket would get confirmed or not on the date of departure. Now, it's a small problem, but if you think about the impact, it's pretty big. Like it's a purchase decision for the customers, right? It's helping them solve their purchase decision problem, because if they end up with a waitlisted ticket on the date of travel, they stand to lose a lot of money, right? So I think that was one of the important sideways bet, and our own DNA helped us do that. One more ecosystem level challenge that people face, and which also helped us get after this next billion user audience, was by unbundling our apps, right? So we created two separate apps. Till about 2013, we were only going after the first 100 million users of India, primarily around the flights use case. But then in 2013, we decided to go after the next billion user audience, right? But we decided to do that with a separate app. And there are a few reasons, and unbundling apps is one of the reasons why we could succeed and grow that fast, right? One reason why we did that is because obviously there was no overlap between these two audiences, the first 100 million users in India and the next billion users. There was absolutely no overlap. Second is, if you think about, we were going after an audience which was going to be mobile only ecosystem, right? Which means that discovery was mostly through search traffic, which means that you had to kind of optimize your app search for better install conversion. So imagine having an app which is optimized for 20 keywords rather than just 5 keywords focused around, let's say, those primary use cases that those next billion user audiences were looking for, which is trains in this case, right? And the third most important reason is that we could customize the app. We were going after an Android segment which was very low end. So they didn't have enough device storage, and we had to build an app which was much smaller, right? Obviously, there were many other customizations we did that I'll talk about in a bit. But also remember that unbundling apps is also hard to maintain, because you end up, having teams which will have to maintain two separate apps. And as a brand, it also becomes increasingly difficult to maintain a common brand identity across the two different apps that you have. Now, I'll talk about some of the optimizations that we did, which worked for us. One key optimization was regional languages, right? So as you know, in India, more than half of the population, or even more than that, they can't converse in English, right? If you talk about non-English content, that is growing 10 times faster than English content. Or consumption for non-English media is also going 5 times faster, right? So it's a huge opportunity going after the vernacular or the regional languages. And that's why we built the app that supported all of the 8 major languages for us. One of the other tricks that worked for us was that even the push notification that we said, or the news articles that we made, we always made them in all the local languages as well, in order to have, and they had far better click-through rates and engagement, right, that we saw. One of the other things that we saw that, on average, an Android device in India would be in the $100 range. It might have gone down now as well, right? And the other fact is that 50% of the storage is taken up by the firmware and the pre-burned apps that come with the OEM manufacturers, right? Now, the numbers back then showed that 1 out of 2 app uninstall in India was still due to the lack of space on their devices, right? Which means that we had to kind of make every half a megabyte reduction that we did in the size of the app resulted in like thousands of incremental daily installs, right? And little by little, that's how we optimize it, right? We even created different device builds to ensure that we could create different sizes of the app for different device targeting, right? And also relied a lot on not having a lot of images, whereas just going by text, etc. Right. One of the things that we would probably not relate to much is that back in the days, internet speed, the average internet connectivity speed was very, very little. You won't imagine, even up like 3-4 years back, it was about 5 megabits per second with a small b, right? Which means that making sure that the app worked without internet. So what we did is we built some of the proprietary features in the app. It worked without internet. Making sure that even when you are offline or disconnected, traveling inside a train, you would be able to use many of the functionalities, right? Not just the ability to search trains, but we also were able to locate a train in real time, without GPS and without internet, using cell tower location data, right? So we had to do all those sorts of optimizations to make sure that this particular use case, which customers were facing, which was not having internet connectivity, not having ubiquitous internet connectivity, was solved for within the app, right? We allowed people to do that. Also, small hacks, right? Once you have an app that works without internet, how do you promote that, right? So we realized that just putting like a small label in your app icon, or putting that message that the app works offline, or an offline label, it kind of ensured that we got a lot more install conversions, right? And that was really, really important for us going forward as well. So now this is more about taking a walk in the past, right? Like all those things, you might say that, it's something that's not relevant. A lot of things might not be relevant in different countries and different places. So, what are some of the things that, I'll just talk about some last few things that, we are doing as we speak to target this next billion user customers, is focusing on voice, right? I mean, I think this is almost like beating a dead horse, but the fact is that the next billion users will rely primarily on video and voice, right? And this is something that we already know. Everybody knows that keyboard is kind of clumsy, and not just keyboard, but imagine using a keyboard in a regional language in India. I can tell you that it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, putting the name of a station like Thiruvananthapuram on a Hindi keyboard is it could take you a few minutes, right? I mean, however, using voice to do that is great, right? So just simple steps that we did, like we voice enabled a lot of input fields inside the app, right? Anything that you can input, we just made sure that you could input that using voice as well, right? And that did a lot of it solved a lot of customer problems, right? Even when it comes to customer support, right? Talking over a chat on customer support, especially for next billion user audience, is not easy. It's very, very difficult for them to type, right? Especially when it comes to typing. So one of the things that became very important for us was, first of all, understanding the language. And in India, one of the things that happens is that there's mixed code language as well. People mix, English and Hindi together, or a couple of other languages together. So the ability to understand, if you are building a natural language engine to understand, your users, you need to make sure that you are able to kind of combine these two languages and understand them well, right? And not just that, you need to have voice input for people to kind of easily talk to your customer support, right, and get your problems resolved. One last thing I just want to talk about, which we are building right now, is voice over app. Now, this is sort of a multimodal interface that allows people to not just talk to the app, but also navigates through the app interface seamlessly. And imagine, you can just say something like, for example, if you were just checking for your trip status last time and you open the app, it might just talk back to you as soon as you open the app. Do you want to check the status of your flight? Or do you want to check the status of your refund? It will just seamlessly take you to the right screen inside the app, right? So that is one of the things we are really, really looking forward to, helping these next billion user customers, handhold them with a multimodal user interface, which is backed by both voice and visual interface, right? So with that, I'd end this here. I hope this was useful for people who are building for the next billion users in different parts of the world. And this was our experience building for them. And this is how we were able to succeed. There's still a long way to go. We still see this the next billion users coming online every year, and that market is really, really huge. So we're really looking forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Rajnish. Thank you. And enjoy your trip in Europe. It's good to see you on a business trip. Next time we'll see you back in Singapore. Thank you, Rajnish.